Never let a crisis go to waste is a famous quote from former US Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel. It is one of the parasitic oligarchy's favourite strategies for power retention. These days, they are not even hiding it. They are openly admitting that they use disasters, natural or otherwise, to push their agenda. Recently, in The Guardian, failed former Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull directly called on the cult to use these fires to push their agenda. He demanded that current Prime Minister Scott Morrison betray his base, betray the coalition's election platform, and shamelessly push climate cult policies. He stated, quote, "There are simply no more excuses. We cannot allow political prejudice and vested interests to hold us up any longer. If ever there was a crisis not to waste, it is this one. Morrison has the chance now to reinstate the NEG with higher targets. Both he and Josh Frydenberg were among its strongest supporters when I was PM. They abandoned it in the lead up to an election to pacify the right wing of the coalition that sabotaged it in the first place. The election is won, and the fires have surely demonstrated that an integrated climate and energy policy is vital if we are to be serious about cutting emissions." End quote. All this despite the fact that the climate cult are mostly responsible for the devastation of these fires in the first place. They prevented adequate fuel reduction burns, alpine and national park cattle grazing, and fined farmers for clearing their own land. All this despite the fact that they were warned repeatedly that fuel loads were going to cause a devastating bushfire, yet they continue to push their anti-human agenda. You can watch my previous video on this issue for a full summary of who is to blame for this crisis, link in the description. Malcolm Turnbull is far from the only climate cultist desperate to use the Australian bushfire crisis to push their Luciferian religious agenda, shamelessly. Every member of the climate cult got the memo, thus they are all out in force, desperate not to waste this crisis and convert as many people to their satanic religion as possible. Thank you so much for watching so far. I promise the content will resume in a moment. This work relies on the generosity of loyal fans to support it, and the best way you can do that, other than sharing the video, is by heading over to RRTV and making a pledge. Not only does this support my work, but it supports a number of independent creators. The added bonus being you get access to a small but growing pool of exclusive RRTV content with any pledge. Thank you so much for your support. Now, back to the important stuff. Arrgh. One of the first climate cultists to try take advantage of the bushfire crisis was Failfax editor Peter Harcher, using his platform to shamelessly demand policy changes, stating, quote, "The raging fires, the drought, the water shortages, not caused by climate change but intensified by it, are changing attitudes in Australia. Rather than play a grudging catch-up later, Morrison has the opportunity to lead, not by rushing to take selfies with Greta Thunberg and announcing a target of zero emissions by Monday. The big opportunity is to smash the whole paradigm that has held Australia in paralysis for a decade. Renewable energy is a multi-trillion-dollar growth industry. Australia already is participating, but largely in spite of federal government policy, not because of it. Morrison has the opportunity to transform Australia's politics as well as its economy and climate policy. Champion an economic opportunity for Australia to lead in one of the biggest growth sectors of the 21st century. Rather than persisting with the dead-end dichotomy of cheap electricity versus climate action, he can take the lead in enlarging an existing investment boom, creating a strong economy with the cheapest electricity and dramatically cutting carbon output as a result." End quote. We need to address the lies in this piece directly. Firstly, that so-called renewables are growing in spite of government policy. This is a flat-out lie. Renewables in Australia are already receiving billions of dollars per year via the taxpayer, and these handouts are not expected to go anywhere anytime soon. Despite Harcher's claims, if not for direct taxpayer handouts, the so-called renewable energy industry would barely exist at all. The next lie is that renewable energy is actually cheap. This is complete bunk. Renewable energy is much more expensive and far less efficient than fossil fuels. The more renewables we force upon the population, the higher prices go and the less reliable our power gets. Saying otherwise is fraudulent. Finally, the claim that human emissions of CO2 made these fires more intense is not only a lie, but a dangerous lie that puts lives at risk. Carbon dioxide is literally a key ingredient of many fire extinguishers. It does not make fires worse, it puts them out. Climate cult claims that man-made climate change made these fires worse is debunked rubbish. It is a physical impossibility. The climate cultists over at the Con could not wait to use the bushfires to push their religion onto us, with an article on December 3rd entitled, "Earth has a couple more chances to avoid catastrophic climate change. This week is one of them." In other words, exactly what the warming cult have told us for decades now. Apparently, the world is always going to end in the next 5 years unless we act right now. Like all doomsday cults who set a date for the end of the world, once the date arrives, they simply extend the date. They have been playing this same old game since the 80s. The cult simply assume everyone has forgotten the last prediction, then go ahead and make a new one. Over at The Guardian, Jason Wilson published an article that unironically claims the cult needs to challenge authority more. A strange claim given their cult has a near monopoly on the common narrative, and even supposedly skeptical political parties still pay homage to it. It is the religion of the parasitic ruling class. You cannot challenge authority while also agreeing with it on everything. Duh! Feminists got in on the act, declaring resistance to the climate cult a sign of male weakness. From Megan McKenzie over at taxpayer-funded left-wing propaganda centre Their ABC, quote, "Put simply, fragile masculinity might be the biggest obstacle to real climate action. Masculinity has been associated with fossil fuel consumption, extraction and burning for decades. Leaving fossil fuels in the ground symbolises a loss of power and money. Some male leaders see real climate action as a threat to power and to profit, through extraction and exploitation of the environment." End quote. Take that, fellas. Unless you agree with the climate cult, then you are not a real man. You are just fragile and need some education. This is classic feminine GSRRM tactics. They cannot prove their hypothesis, nor can they convince normal people, so they have to shame you into compliance. One of the most worrying statements came from Melbourne Watermelons MP Adam Bant, whom Unshackled contributor Lucas Rosas called a pint-sized Four Eyes. Bant literally called for the criminalisation of questioning his cult, claiming that there will be climate trolls in the future for those who dare challenge it. Given he is a member of parliament, maybe this known communist sympathiser should explain exactly what laws he wants to inflict upon us. As worrying as this is, it is not a surprise. The Green Movement has been one of secret communist totalitarianism from the start. Bant's comments are exactly what to expect from these fools. Naturally, not wanting to let the crisis go to waste, the Toonsberger weighed in and of course blamed the bushfires on man-made climate change. However, in a rare display of strength, Prime Minister Scott Morrison rebuked her, stating that we will do what is in the best interest of Australia rather than try to impress foreigners. One great comment came from Pauline Hanson, who said, quote, "When the forest floors have not been allowed to be cleared, or the fire breaks done, or the RFS allowed to do their job effectively, or people building houses can't clear the trees because of the legislation, it is ridiculous. It is a build-up of fuel over a period of time, 30 plus years, that has come to this stage now. If you are going to have a royal commission into it, throw bloody climate change out of the window and let's look at the pure facts of why we have had the bushfires, how they were handled, what we can do better to stop it happening again, rather than lowering emissions as they are dead set on doing. If you are going to charge people more tax, how on earth is that supposed to reduce the Earth's temperature? I would like to know." End quote. Damn right. It was a lack of fuel reduction burns, cattle grazing in national parks, and banning private land clearing and fire breaks for the sake of a few wild animals that made these fires so bad. Not man-made climate change. The climate cult are responsible for these actions, therefore they are responsible for the fires, but instead of accepting blame, they use the fires to push their doomsday cult. They are psychopathic, but I digress. David Icke calls these nutjobs out for the very clear strategy they are invoking, that is, problem, reaction, solution. Or in the cult's case, no problem, reaction, solution.
One of the coordinates, one of the methods of manipulation, a massively important one to understand, is one I've dubbed problem, reaction, solution, where you want to change society in a way that if you do it openly, you'll get resistance, massive resistance from the population. So what you do is you create a problem covertly, you blame someone or something else for it, you pass that fake version of the event through the unquestioning, pathetic mainstream media to the people, unquestioned overwhelmingly and certainly uninvestigated, and you want the people to react to the manufactured problem with outrage, with fear, and you want them to say, do something. What are they going to do about it? At which point you then offer solutions openly with changes in legislation and society and its structure to advance your agenda. And because of the problem, reaction, solution, you do not get the resistance here that you would have got without the manufactured problem. 9/11 is a bloody classic. Another way of describing this is ordo ab chaos, the Latin motto of the 33rd degree of Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, order out of chaos, problem, reaction, solution. Create the chaos, then offer the order, your change out of that chaos. So like I say, 9/11 was a wonderful, classic, most blatant example of it. You want to change society, so you create a massive problem. As a result of that problem, you offer the solution, all there, written and ready, the Patriot Act in America and around the world, their versions of it, to change society and to launch a war on terror and an invasion of countries like Afghanistan and, by implication, Iraq. Then there's another version, which I now call no problem reaction solution. This is when you don't need a real problem, you just need the public perception of a problem, i.e. weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, i.e. human-caused climate change. And then you can offer a solution to a problem that doesn't actually exist, but if enough people think it does, well, you got them.
Given the level of trust the public has in the current regime, it should come as no surprise that people are speculating on a wide range of ideas surrounding these fires, with one theory being that the government used energy weapons to start them in order to clear the land required for a high-speed railway. As nuts as this sounds, do not dismiss it offhand. The regime are definitely capable of this kind of plan. It is not even a difficult plan to conduct either. Simply allow fuel to build up and ban property owners from clearing their own land, then wait a few years and start a bunch of fires, then blame Man-Bear-Pig. The same oligarchy who organised 9/11 and other similar false flag operations are more than capable of destroying half the Aussie countryside for their own benefit. It may not be true, but dismissing the hypothesis offhand is idiotic. The parasite class are capable of such actions, therefore we must consider it possible. The best response came from American pastor Steven Anderson, who said the fires were a punishment from God for not allowing pastors to preach freely here. Given the fact that the climate cult created these fires, it is hard to argue against him. The climate cult are idolaters, and idolatry led to the increased fuel and lack of fire breaks that made these fires so dangerous. If Christian preachers in Australia were not so weak and pathetic, and the government did not ban wrong thinkers from speaking or entering, we probably could have avoided this disaster. The climate cult are desperate to use these fires to further their anti-Western religious agenda. They know they are losing popularity, so this could be their last chance. They may have some life left in them yet, but the truth is people are waking up to their blatant and obvious lies. Aside from the truly devout, most people are not willing to pay a cent to stop Man-Bear-Pig, even if they think it is a problem. Nobody is listening anymore. People would rather have a well-paid job and lower power bills than save the world from mythical, man-made climate change. Just like the rest of the parasitic oligarchy, the time of the climate cult is ending. It is only a matter of time until it leaves the front pages and becomes nothing more than a joke of history. Eventually, the mainstream will have to admit that it is a dead religion practiced only by an ever-shrinking group of deluded, devout, useful idiots. Until then, stay on guard, because you never know when the climate trials are about to begin. Hope you enjoyed the video, share the truth around, and I'll see ya when I see ya.